Hello, and today we're going to be reviewing the SKIL ES4651A 12V multi-cutter. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, first up we have the battery slot, and it's a good showing. The battery's locked into place nice and securely, and there is next to no wiggling or looseness to speak of. The play is minimum, and so quite frankly it's an acceptable showing. And when it comes to battery life, you're going to be getting quite a long runtime out of this particular tool's 2 amp hour battery if you decide to purchase it in a kit. Quite frankly, I don't really see the need to upgrade to a 4 amp hour battery with this particular tool, so a 2 amp hour battery should be more than enough for the average user. So quite frankly, everything here is well completely acceptable and a good showing. Moving on. Okay, next up we have the grip, and it's a fairly good showing here. There are plenty of indentations and grooves within the rubberized texture, and the rubberized texture feels to be a very nice high quality material that is a little bit harder than what Ryobi uses. Overall, it's a fairly nice feeling. There are hard plastic points that will help you maintain your grip on this particular tool even in challenging circumstances, and quite frankly I think that they did an excellent job with the overall design here. The angle is a little bit off, but quite frankly it really is hard to design an angle on a tool like this to fit pretty much all users' personal preferences, so I think it's an acceptable showing there as well. And the safety and trigger are easily within your grasp, so no complaints there either. So overall, the grip and ergonomics on this particular tool are completely acceptable and get a pass from me. Moving on. Okay, next up we have the trigger and safety. Now, like on chainsaws, this has an always-on safety, which means unless you're pushing the safety, there is no way to, well, pull the trigger. And you can push the safety from either the left side or right side. Unfortunately, there is no reverse on this particular tool, which is a little bit of a disappointment. It's a, well, full steam ahead all the time sort of a tool, which can get you into some trouble, but there might be a little bit of a design reason to that. So with that being said, it is easy enough to, well, pull the trigger. It's a fixed speed, no variable speed or anything like that, and it's not the fastest speed in the world, but it's good enough. So when it comes to this particular tool's trigger, I have to say it gets the job done and it's good enough. But I am a little bit disappointed that we didn't get a forward or reverse, because in certain situations, if the tool becomes stuck, it would be nice to have a reverse function. So yeah, moving on. Okay, last but not least, we have the cutting blade system. Now, the cutting blades on this particular tool are fairly decent at cutting through most of your thinner materials, such as, you know, your anti-theft packaging or your cardboard boxes. But if you are trying to use this to cut through thicker materials, such as, well, you know, thick chair mats, or your occasional piece of ultra thick carpeting, this tool definitely has some issues. I don't know if I quite believe they're claiming that it has a 1/4 of an inch cutting capacity, because quite frankly I tried running some things that were smaller than that through the jaws of this particular cutter and it failed or got stuck. Which leads me to my next issue with this particular tool. If you do happen to get the blade stuck, well, since there's no reverse, it can be rather difficult to get unstuck. And sometimes when you are in the process of getting it unstuck, well, that rotating blade will end up on the wrong side of the lower blade, causing it to become, well, misaligned and incapable of cutting or self-sharpening until you, well, figure out how to get it unstuck, which will require you to remove the bolt that holds the rotating blade into place, and then trying to force it up as high as you possibly can, and then using a screwdriver to force the lower blade attachment point down until you can get the rotating blade back onto the correct side. This is definitely a major pain and an area of the tool that could use some major design improvement in the future if they decide to update this design in the coming years. Now, another thing about this particular tool, since you can't make any sort of turning cut, means that you can only cut in those straight lines, which can be good for certain projects and is acceptable enough, and I don't really have that big of a problem with personally. But if you are a creative that likes making things out of cardboard and making intricate cutting patterns, this is definitely not going to be the right tool for you. So at the end of the day, the cutting capacity seems to be a little bit off. The fact that the rotating blade seems to become misaligned fairly easily, and the fact that, well, quite frankly, you can't make turns with this particular tool means that there's quite a bit going against this particular tool. And unless you are buying it to simply cut up boxes or, you know, get into security packaging, I would probably recommend taking a look at a different tool. But we'll talk more about that here in a few minutes. But for now, let's move on to the weight of the tool. Okay, without a battery, the tool weighs about 512 grams, or 512 grams, which is about 1.1 pounds. And then with a 2 amp hour battery, the tool will weigh 776 grams, which is about 1.7 pounds. So it's a fairly lightweight tool. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this particular tool in use. I have to say, this definitely is not one of my favorite tools. It works fairly good at getting you into the security packaging and cutting up cardboard boxes, but other than that, it just kind of sucks. I don't think that this has the proper amount of torque for a 12-volt battery system. It definitely feels like it's a little bit under-spec'd there. It definitely doesn't seem to have a 1/4 of an inch cutting capacity, or at least on most objects I tried to cut that were about 1/4 of an inch, it just couldn't seem to handle them all that well. And then when you also couple it with the fact that it can't seem to cut through thin materials because they get caught between the rotating blade and the lower blade, it means that this particular tool's options for things to cut through are fairly narrow, which is definitely a bit of a pain or a problem. And the fact that you can't make turning cuts through cardboard means, or thinner plastics, means that this is also another, well, headache, unfortunately. And definitely means that it's a far less useful tool for a lot of different people. Quite frankly, I really think that this thing probably struggles with finding a good market share because it just doesn't seem to accelerate in any category. There's no variable speed, so you can't control how fast you're cutting. There's no reverse, so you can't get it easily unstuck once it becomes, well, stuck on something. And, well, quite frankly, it's also fairly expensive, coming in at around $50. So yeah, I'm not quite sure that, well, the good experiences outweigh the bad experiences, but let's go ahead and recap with the pros and cons, and you can wait and find out for yourself if this is a tool that you're interested in buying. And the first pro would be size. Overall, this is a fairly compact tool, which means it's fairly easy to transport or store, so this is a pro in my opinion. And the second pro would be straight cut. This thing is really good at cutting straight, and that's about it. So in my opinion, if you need to make a straight cut, this is a pro. And the next pro would be the grip. The grip is a fairly well designed feature on this particular tool with plenty of rubberized texture, indentations, and the ergonomics are also quite good as well. So quite frankly, everything here is a pro. Self-sharpening. Having a self-sharpening blade, it will definitely save you time and hopefully money. So in my opinion, this is a pro. And the first meh is it's a little bit slow. It's not super slow, but at the same time, I do wish that it was a little bit faster. So in my opinion, this really isn't a pro, it really isn't a con, it's just kind of meh. Okay, here comes the cons, and the first con is it can't turn, which means that you'll be going straight, which can be a good thing, but at the same time, if you're trying to be creative, this can definitely be a major negative. Blade hops or will become misaligned, causing you major pains and annoyances because getting that blade back on the proper side can be a major, well, hurdle. So in my opinion, this is a con. Underpowered. Overall, this thing does not feel like a 12-volt tool. It feels more like a, well, 8-volt or 4-volt tool. So quite frankly, this is definitely a bit of a con in my opinion. No belt clip. Now, having the ability to hang this off your belt can be a major con in a lot of different circumstances. So in my opinion, well, it's a con. And the next con would be the price. Coming in at $50 tool only, that is definitely a bit expensive considering the overall characteristics of this particular tool, so this is a con in my opinion. Moving on. No reverse. I really wish that this thing had a reverse because quite frankly there's been several circumstances where that would have been very useful and it doesn't have it, so it wasn't useful, so in my opinion this is a con. And that is it for the pros and cons. Final thoughts on this particular tool. I really wanted to like this particular tool, and for the most part, I really like pretty much all the tools that SKIL has on the market. But this particular tool definitely missed its mark. I definitely think that it feels underpowered. I definitely think the cutting capacity isn't as good as they were saying it was. And I definitely also think that, well, quite frankly, it gets jammed up super easily. So I just don't think that this thing has too many redeeming qualities. If all you need is a tool to get you into, well, plastic packaging fairly quickly and easily, I guess this will handle it, but you're definitely going to be paying a more premium price than several other options on the market. And so, quite frankly, this particular tool only comes recommended if you are trying to get into plastic packaging or cutting up cardboard boxes in straight lines. And that is it for this video. If you liked it, please like and subscribe, and we will see you all next time. God bless.